Okay, good. Good. Got a couple more coming in. Isabella, Yannick, super. Good. All right, we just wait. Josiah's just coming in. Okay, good. Lovely. Thanks for joining. Happy to see so many of you signed in. Thanks a lot. Okay, today we're going to have a look at a little bit of the information from chapter 3 about stress. It's a really interesting chapter. They do a great job, I think, of making it relevant for you as students. And yeah, we'll go through a little bit. I want to point out some of the physiological responses and psychological responses before you get into reading on Wednesday about the all the management techniques for this, okay? When we have finished the notes, I've got a couple of announcements to make to help you guys out with what's on the syllabus there. And yeah, 3 announcements, I think. I have to remember there are 3 things I have to talk to you about. Okay. Do try, jump in if you've got an experience that is relevant, or you've got a question. If I ask a question, try to give, it's not a trick question when we ask questions. It was a little bit embarrassing on Friday when Chief Malden was trying to get you guys engaged and people were struggling to answer to him, all right? It's not a trick. We just want to hear what you have to say, okay? So if I can't remember what I'm going to be talking about, but there might be a question, and if there is, try to say something, right? Again, it's really, really hard standing here not being able to see you. And it makes it very difficult to know whether you're bored or whether you're enjoying it, or, I can't see your faces. Usually I can look out around the classroom and I can tell, who's finding the material interesting and who seems to be disengaged. I can't do that now, so it's interesting to be talking about stress because this is very stressful, right? It's difficult. And I know it's difficult for you as well. Very difficult not being here. So I think this chapter's hugely relevant for all of us right now in this situation. Okay? All right, let's see. Get this PowerPoint up for you. So when you look at the list of notes on Blackboard, there are actually a couple of other PowerPoints on this chapter that summarize information in the book, but if you've got the book, I would really recommend that you read the chapter well. There's a lot of very cool information in this chapter, all right? I need to turn that light off. Sorry, as I said, I'm on my own this morning, so I've been relying on Ryan to do all the organising of the classroom. Okay, here we go. All right. Okay, so initially, what is stress? All right, we talked a little bit about this already, and we looked at the relationship between exercise and the immune system, and we'll remind you of that later in the notes. Stress has lots of components involved to it. Some of them are psychological, many of them are physiological, and most people think about stress as being a negative response to something that they feel is threatening or demanding of them. But remember that we can have positive stress up to a point. Things like getting engaged, right? Stressful, but it's very positive. Exercising counts as a physiological stressor, but it's typically considered positive and good for us unless we do too much of it, okay? So the variable that's causing the stress is called the stressor, okay? One of the really important things to bear in mind when you think about stress as a response to a demanding or threatening situation. So this is very personal, right? Something that I find stressful, someone else may find challenging and enjoying, all right? And there's a very good example in the chapter of someone skydiving, right? Is that challenging and kind of fun, or is that just totally scary and it's not going to be fun at all, right? So my perception of the event or the environment is what triggers the stress. So I think that's an important point to understand, because it means that we should be careful with our language. You know, if someone is telling you, I'm really stressed, this is just completely overwhelming, and you're standing there going, this is a piece of cake, what's the problem, right? Try to say it slightly differently, okay? Don't say, well, I don't understand, this is a piece of cake, what's your problem? Pull your socks up, it's not going to be an issue, right? That doesn't help the person who's feeling the stress. And you're not looking at the environment from their perception, right? Their perception is based on their experiences in the past and their view of the task at hand. So you can't understand what they're feeling, you can only empathize with them, right? Unless you're feeling the same thing because you're also finding the situation very stressful and overwhelming. Okay, and then you can sympathize with them, right? So that we've got to look at, you know, sympathy is really understanding because I'm going through the same thing. Empathy is allowing them to have their feelings even though I don't really understand why they feel like that, okay? So it's important to think about that, I think, especially in this situation, right? Because I know some students, I got some feedback last semester when we had to leave campus, and it was really fascinating to me. I had some students who clearly found trying to manage school from home extremely stressful, right? The Wi-Fi was slow, they had younger siblings running around making a load of noise, right? All kinds of issues. I had other students who gave me feedback who said, oh, I really loved being able to do class and homework and things on my own time and not having to come to class, right? So totally different responses to the same situation, right? Remember, so distress is a negative or something that I find difficult to control. You know, I am a bit of a control freak, so when I'm not in control, I get very stressed, right? Like last week was awful because I had so much to do and I had a deadline that was getting in the way of me being a good teacher, and I found that really stressful, right? Eustress is a positive, right? There would be positive outcomes. So my exercising moderately is positive for my health. But if I exercise really aggressively and I never take a day off and I work too hard, then ultimately that will become a negative response in your body, right? So let's look at the different kinds of responses. So the physical response is connected to the hormones that are released when we apply a stressor, okay? So we release cortisol, epinephrine, and norepinephrine in response to stress, okay? And those hormones are responsible for turning up the nervous system, the sympathetic nervous system, so that we are able to be more physically, respond physically more appropriately. So this is called the fight or flight response, right? So it means that my heart rate goes up, my blood pressure goes up, blood flow to the heart and to my skeletal muscles improves, so we open up the arteries that are taking blood to our legs and our arms, and we shut down the vessels that are taking blood to our digestive system, for example. So it's one of the reasons why it's not a good idea to eat right before exercising, because that food can't get digested because the blood flow is being directed away to the muscles, all right? So that puts us physically in a situation we're ready to fight if we need to, or better off, run like crazy, right? So that we don't get into the fight and we don't get hurt, right? There's a syndrome, it's shortened to GAS, which I always think is quite funny. A researcher called Hans Selye came up with this idea, and so the A is alarm, so general adaptation syndrome is the GAS, and it's three elements in this syndrome. Step one is the alarm. So the adrenal glands start to release these stress hormones, and your heart rate starts rising, and your blood pressure starts rising, right? And you start to feel a little bit okay. Then step two is the resistance phase. So during that phase, the body is able to maintain protection within this kind of uber state of alert, right? Step three is the problem, right? Step three is the point where you've been releasing these hormones for so long, over a chronic amount of time, that your body becomes exhausted, and you are, your immune system is weakened, you're much more likely to develop an infection. You're much more likely, as we'll see, to not be concentrating or attending. So if you're an athlete, if you're in this stage, you're more likely to get injured, okay? So psychological responses are trickier to kind of follow from the outside, right? I mean, I can tell if someone's heart rate and blood pressure are higher because they'll get a bit rosy, or I might see their carotid artery bulge out a bit with the pressure, right? So psychological responses are things like getting really angry, or getting very frustrated, or getting very anxious or depressed, right? Some people who are very stressed eat, right? And they eat when they're stressed. Other people who are stressed stop eating and don't eat enough calories, right? So again, the response to the stress is highly individual, right? It's not a right or a wrong, it's just individual variation, right? If we're stressed, because of these hormones, it's often difficult to focus our attention. We might have trouble sleeping. Our memory often gets affected because cortisol has, there are receptors, so the part of your brain that is responsible for managing memories is the hippocampus. The hippocampus has a lot of cortisol receptors on it. And so when I'm, again, chronically stressed, and there's all this cortisol flooding around my body, then it attaches to those receptors and my memory gets shut down, right? It's one of the reasons why I always say in my other classes where I have exams, you know, you have to try to find a way to not be stressed about the exam, because the more stressed you are, the less likely when you sit down that you'll be able to recall what you've been studying, right? So stress can be a real nuisance when you're a student, right? If I can reframe how I feel about the exam, right? This exam is going to show me how much I've learned, right? And it's going to let me know what I still don't understand, and that's important. I have to know what I don't understand, right? If I can reframe it like that, it becomes less stressful. But it's very difficult to do, right? I couldn't do it when I was your age. I often left exams having barely written anything on the paper, right? But when I was older and I went back to grad school and I had so much more experience and I'd been out to work and, you know, grad school was just fun, then it was like, let's go see, what do I know, right? But it is difficult to do, to reframe that environment, that kind of idea. A lot of people will experience burnout where they just can't cope with stressors anymore. So we sometimes see that in athletes as well, right? But everybody can experience burnout. We often see it in teachers, right, and coaches. So there's very few people who coach for their entire career, right? Because coaching is quite stressful, particularly if you're on the kind of contract where they can kick you out the door any day, right? So many teachers and many coaches drop out after 5 to 10 years and pick up a different career, right? Or a related career. Again, if there's low levels of stress, that can be positive for many people, right? If I'm bored, I'm not motivated, right? But if there's a little bit of stress, just enough to get me out of the boredom and engage, then that can be beneficial because now I'm paying attention, right? Now I'm willing to put forth effort. Okay. A lot of people might respond to psychological stress using negative strategies, right? So let's have a look at before we get there. So, stressful life events. So your self-assessment for this chapter is a survey type thing that looks at levels of stress for college freshmen. Right? I know some of you aren't freshmen, but a lot of you are. So do it anyway, even if you're not a freshman, because it's still interesting. We have to be aware, though, that stress doesn't necessarily cause the health problem. Sometimes it can. But it depends on what the physiological problem becomes, right? If it is something like really high chronic blood pressure, then that could be caused by the stress. But if I get cancer, right? So when I was young, I got cancer when I was 27. My dad, to this day, swears that my cancer was caused by the stressful job boyfriend type situation I was in at the time. I don't think so, especially since it wasn't genetically tagged. So I think it was just, bad luck or whatever. But there are certain illnesses that are genetically predisposed, right? And if you have chronic stress, it may trigger that disease or illness to begin, right? So chronic stress is a real problem. Acute stress, exercise, a little bit of panic about a deadline, right? How much easier is it to get the homework done or to get my reports written last week on the day of the deadline, right? When I could have done them earlier in the week and it would have been much less stressful, okay? So, all right? So, let me show you, because we actually didn't do the inverted U the last time we were looking at that relationship, so let me show you this, if I can. Okay. All right, so remember these lines are going to be super wiggly. Let's see what I can do. It's better if I move the mouse up here. All right, so yx. And this time on x, we've got the stress, right? And on y, we have immune function, all right? So, if the stress is low, what we see is kind of off immune function. So if I'm bored all the time, I also am more likely to catch the tummy bug that's going around campus, right? And so what we see on this curve is it's like an inverted U. Okay, so here stress is high, here stress is moderate. The stress could be exercise, remember. So if I'm sedentary, my immune function is not great, right? If I exercise too hard, I depress my immune system. But if I exercise at a moderate level, then I facilitate immune function, right? And we're much less likely to catch whatever bug is going around, right? Not that you won't catch it, but you're less likely to catch it, right? Because immune function is optimal here. Doesn't matter what the stress is, okay? The accumulation of stress could be the problem, right? So what if you're fighting with your partner every day, and you go to work and your boss is on your case every day, and your girlfriend isn't answering her phone every day, right? All those things together could put you into that high level of stress, even though each one of them on their own you might be able to manage. Does that make sense? Hello, hello. Guys, sometimes I think you log in and then go away. And I'm talking to myself.
It makes sense.
Thank you. Okay. All right, so what are some of the variables that we can look at? Personality plays a role in how we respond to stress. If you've taken a psychology class, you may have some experience with understanding different personality traits. Background experiences, you know, do I come from a safe, warm, happy marriage, you know, loving parents, sibling, or do I come from a single parent home where the parent was out at work 24 hours a day and I had to cook my own dinner and get myself to school, and, right? Very different experiences, and how I respond to those experiences is somewhat based upon my personality, right? So, we already mentioned the skydiver. Are difficult situations overwhelming or challenging for you? Right? Does it depend upon the situation? Okay. So, if I'm an athlete, is the competition challenging and exciting, or is the competition overwhelming and anxiety producing? Right? Same with, like we see it with actors, right? They get what we call stage fright. Right? Why would someone with all that experience suddenly get stage fright? Right? They do all the work, and then when they get out there, they can't perform.
Because they feel like they're going to mess up a line or something.
Right, yeah, because they feel like they might let the other people on stage down, right? We often see athletes choke, right? And the person that we expect to come out the winner doesn't win because they just got the stress level went too high, right? Everybody has a point, kind of a cut-off point. And once I'm over the cut-off point, I'm not in control anymore, right? And that cut-off point can be very low for some people. It doesn't take very much to tip them over the top. and it can be very high for other people. You can give them anything. Just keep piling it on, pile it on, pile it on, and they keep managing. Right? You can't ask the person with the low stress threshold to deal with that amount of work the same way the person with the high stress threshold. Right? And then what strategies, what behaviors do we choose to manage our stress? Right? Do we do something healthy, like go for a walk at the trail, like we did at the beginning of the semester? Do we take a yoga class, or do we use the meditation that we did last couple of weeks ago now, right? Or do we use drugs, right?
Mine's just eating. I either eat or don't eat.
Eat or don't eat? Mine's wine and yoga. I do both. No, but when I was younger and I couldn't afford wine, I was the same. I would eat. I would buy like the biggest packet of cookies I could find, and I would just sit and eat the entire packet. Yeah. Right? So the thing is, right, I'm not suggesting rights or wrongs, although it's probably healthier to do the yoga than to use drugs, depending on, right, I mean, one glass of wine is okay, and way past one glass of wine with all this COVID stuff, right, and that's not good, and it's something I have to tackle, right, but not right now. So, you know, it's not a right or wrong, it's understanding yourself, right? Because if I can recognize how I'm responding, then I can change the behavior, or I can reframe the exam so it doesn't get me so upset, right? So, there's a lot more information in the chapter. Table 1 gives you some acute, possibly positive responses to stress. Table 3 looks at common disorders that are linked to your psychological state. Some of the physiological health problems that can develop with chronic stress. You know, so if you're in a job and every day is stressful, right? And that stress there's never any relief. And the weekend isn't long enough to come down to deal with the next week, right? That chronic ongoing issue. So, a lot of people develop IBS. Doesn't mean that the IBS was caused by the stress, but because there are some genetic issues around IBS. So, but the stress turned it on, right?
I have that. I just got diagnosed with that earlier this year before COVID happened.
I'm so sorry, me too. Yeah, and it's not fun.
It took them 3 years to figure out like
what was going on. Yeah. And there are different symptoms, right? And I don't know about you, I don't exhibit the same symptom every time my IBS flares up, right? Sometimes I get really bad, like doubled over bad stomach cramps. Sometimes I get constipated. Sometimes I have diarrhea. Sometimes I can eat. Sometimes I can't eat. You know, so I think it's difficult for it to get diagnosed because it's not always the same. You know.
Yeah, that's how it was for
Yeah. So, well, I'm hoping then that the meditation, and then on Friday we're going to do some yoga, so I'm hoping that that will really help you, because if you can keep that tamp down and not allow it to flare up, life will be a lot easier. A lot easier. Peptic ulcers, again, not necessarily caused by stress, but turned on and made worse if you have them. Headaches, overweight, and then heart disease and cancers, particularly if they're genetic and you have a family history of heart disease or a family history of a particular cancer, then that stress can be problematical. You know, the cortisol and the epinephrine and the norepinephrine, if they're in the bloodstream constantly, start to irritate the walls of the blood vessels, and then you see inflammation in the blood vessels, and that can lead to plaque buildup, that can lead to coronary artery disease and other heart disease. So it's, you know, it is something to be concerned about. You know, especially if you're one of us with the low stress threshold and not like, I have a sister-in-law who you can literally chuck anything out. And she just goes, okay. and my knees are wobbling and I'm like, oh my God. You know, I was like that last week. I was in a bad place last week. It was difficult. You just have to keep, you know, this too shall pass, right? This too shall pass. How am I going to manage it? Right? I don't want to be the person that committed suicide because I was stressed. Right? Because it will pass. You just have to hang on. It could be a year, right? But it will pass. You just have to hang on and keep putting one foot in front of the other and believe that eventually you're going to come out the other side. Right? Any questions? Thanks for sharing your experience. Was that Elizabeth? I can't tell you.
Yes, ma'am, it was me.
Okay, I can't tell who's talking all the time. I'm never sure whether this means that you're the one who's, I don't know. I need to get a bit more techie really, don't I? Yes, thank you for sharing. Because I think, you know, sometimes, especially when you're young, you just kind of feel invincible, you know. When you're 21, 22, you just think, oh, loads of time, everything's going to be great, you know, and it isn't always, you know, and there are some people your age who are struggling and have stress management to do, right? Questions, other comments? Not at the moment? All right, let me start on the 3 things that I needed to let you know about then. The first one is Wednesday, all right? Wednesday, I want you to read this chapter carefully. As I said, I really think, especially given the COVID situation that we're managing, but even on a regular semester, right? There are things going on that can be stressful. And again, if I can recognize it, I've got a much better chance of managing it than if I don't really understand what's going on, right? So read the chapter well. Then you've got a choice, okay? Because last week we were out on Monday and you didn't have your reading application day, you've got a choice then of either doing the self-assessment and the changing health habits on last week's chapter, which was chapter 2, on the psychological health, mental health, or you can do the self-assessment and changing health habits on the stress management. You're only required to do one. You could do both of them if you want to. That would probably be my choice just because I'm really interested in this material, right? But I'm only going to expect you to load one of the chapters. Am I being clear? I think I've made it clear on the syllabus. You can complete either, not the self-assessment and changing health habits, the application questions. So you can complete either the application for chapter 2 or the application for chapter 3. Okay. Then the next item I wanted to let you know about is that Friday morning's isolation activity will have 2 parts to it because we're not in the classroom. So as you read this chapter, you'll see they give you a relaxation technique. And normally we pair up in the classroom and you do the relaxation technique on each other. Okay? So I want you to do, that will be one part of the Friday isolation activity with a little bit of film. Then the second part will be, I'll do a brief little bit of yoga in class. So if you can come to class and do it with me, then you're done for that bit. If you can't come to class, then you'll need to do it and film yourself a little bit. Okay? And it won't be very long, couple of sun salutations, probably 5-10 minutes, that's all, just to give you an idea. I just want to, some of you may not have experienced yoga yet, and I want to give you an opportunity to see a little bit of what it's like, okay? And then the third item was, if you look on the syllabus, this Saturday, it is the Out of Darkness community walk for suicide prevention. And I need to go back to the website and see at the beginning of the semester when I was putting the syllabus together, they didn't have any details about how they were going to try to set up the walk, because obviously we can't do a community walk this year. So I will go back to the website and have a look at what they have put together, and I will put some notes up. It's not mandatory, right? There isn't a grade, there's nothing, it's just an opportunity to show support for suicide prevention. And, and maybe get involved if it's something that has touched your life. It's very sad when that happens. It's sad when they're not successful, and it's even worse when they are successful, right? And you lose that person. So, yeah, I will do my best to find out sort of what the group are putting together. It's a national organization. The New Mexico faction do a really good job of numbers of people that attend the walks, money that's raised, things like that. So, yeah, very worthwhile thing to give a little bit of time to. If you'd like to, you don't have to. Okay? So, I think that's all I've got for you today. Anybody got questions or comments? I have office hours this afternoon, so if this all starts kind of percolating down and you suddenly go, oh, what was that she said? And you want to check with me, you can come to office hours. I'm really enjoying watching your little bits of video from the Friday activities. That's so much fun. So hopefully we can keep that up. Some people are loading video without any problems at all in Blackboard, and other people are having issues. So I might email you, Will, and try to find out your technique for loading your film, because you never seem to have a problem. And then maybe I could put a little how-to note up or something, I don't know, because I haven't got the foggiest idea. What am I like? Okay, questions, comments?
So, we still have to do the chapter quizzes, a self-assessment and a changing health habits for this week? Right?
Yeah, the self-assessment and the changing health habits, the ones for this side of midterm are due October 2nd. I think it's October 2nd, right around midterm. I would recommend that you stay on top of them and do them every week, because otherwise you're going to have a whole load of work to do right, at one go when you're trying to get ready for other exams and things. And then the other half of the semester, just the worksheet bits are due just before finals. And then there's the participation, which is the application questions and the little video bits that are due on the day of class. Does that answer your question properly?
Yeah, thank you.
Okay. I think when you're looking at the syllabus, there just wasn't room on the schedule there to get the pre-chapter quizzes in as well. So remember to turn the page, and the pre-chapter quiz timetable is on the second page at the end of the schedule. Okay? All right. Wednesday, I'll be in the classroom. You don't have to log into class necessarily unless you want to, because that keeps you, holds you accountable for getting the questions done and the reading done. But I'll be there in case you've got questions. And then Friday, I'll be here in the classroom doing just a little bit of yoga with you, hopefully. Okay? Bye. Have a nice day.
Thank you, you
Have a
too.
good day.
Stop recording over here.